Good day, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's WorldSkills conference talk on equality, diversity, and inclusion. My name is Laurence Gates, and I will be your host for this session as a board member of WorldSkills International. So as you're joining us on Zoom or on Facebook, welcome. WorldSkills has had an interest in this topic for quite a while as we joined the He for She campaign in 2016 and have been exploring this topic and how to take it forward ever since. We want to continue to bring people together and to enhance exchanges between young professionals and all partners and policymakers involved on this topic. So that's the goal for these WorldSkills conference talks. We want to share expertise, we want to learn from each other, and we also want to provide a networking platform for all people involved, and especially since physical meetings are unfortunately out of bound and look unlikely for the near future. I'm joined today by some partners who will share their experiences with us. So I'd like to especially welcome with us Denise Amiot, the President CEO of the Colleges and Institutes Canada, CCAN. My thanks also to Sharon Blyfield from Coca-Cola and Megan West from Mastercam joining us for these talks and taking the time off their busy schedules. Thank you also to Dr. Nia Bentley-Gockman, who will be sharing with us the results of some research done on this topic by WorldSkills UK. And last but not least, welcome also to Euphrasias Mulenga, who is a representative for Africa on our WorldSkills Champions Trust. She is from Zambia and she competed in WorldSkills Abu Dhabi 2017 in the field of aircraft maintenance. So without much further ado, I will move over to taking some questions over to Euphrasias to start. And before I forget, we welcome questions and comments as well. We will have some time to look into those as we progress. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to ask your questions in the comments. Or if you're joining us on Zoom, please do feel free also to use the question and answer button to give us your feedback and your questions. So, Euphrasias, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. As I mentioned earlier, you competed in aircraft maintenance, and that's also been your career choice, which is a bit of an unusual choice, I would say. So, could you tell us what prompted you? Why did you choose a career in aircraft maintenance?
Firstly, I would really like to say thank you to be here to share a little bit about my story and to represent the youth on this topic. Why I chose my career basically was the passion that I had for engineering in general. And this is something that I discovered when I was really young, as I would help out my dad with the tools when he would fix things around the house or maybe service the car. And having identified aircraft as such sophisticated machines for me personally to understand, I decided to pursue aircraft maintenance engineering as a career.
That's great. What would you say was key to your success in your training? Is there anything in particular that really helped you along the way? Because I guess you must have faced some difficulties as well, like every young person choosing a career. What was it that really helped you and motivated you as you went along?
Definitely, I categorize them in three. Firstly, the support that I got from my parents, because despite the industry facing challenges, my parents still allowed me to enroll into an industry that was really struggling to thrive due to the long closed down national airline and the limited maintenance facilities that were already flooded with my seniors. Secondly, hard work, especially after discovering that my field had was lacking gender diversity. I really felt it within me that my hard work and success through this training would definitely be an encouragement and an inspiration for another woman out there to pursue their dreams. Thirdly, the passion I had for the skill made me innovative enough to make my way in the industry, because it was said that in the third year, third term, we're supposed to do industrial attachments. But due to the limited maintenance facilities, it wasn't guaranteed that everyone is going to have a place to do that. So when everyone was going on holidays, I decided to stay back and go look for a place where I would train, just in case when 3 months time comes, I don't have the opportunity to be in a place to practice. So I found that that gave me an advantage over others when they were coming back to be in the 3 months industrial attachments. And a few months after finishing my exams, I was actually employed by the company. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's what I love
Thank
about
you.
our champions. They always have such interesting stories. Thanks for sharing that. And as I mentioned, you took part in our competition, our WorldSkills Abu Dhabi competition in 2017. Could you share a bit of that experience and also tell us what was different, when you compare that to your training and what you went through to qualify? How does that compare with taking part in a WorldSkills competition? How was your experience?
My experience during the competition, I would say it was mind-blowing and life-changing experience, through the series of events that took place just when we got there. Because firstly, I got to step out of my zone, my field, and just got to witness how skills was being appreciated at a very, very high level in general. And then later, having witnessed champions representing their countries march through the main arena during the opening ceremony, it did spark a desire within me to want to see more African countries march along with the rest of the world through the World Skills movement, because I believe the world is really not complete without Africa. Not only that, but during my training and going to the competition, I got an opportunity to work with the state-of-art equipment that I didn't get to when I was practicing and training back home. But not only that, at the moment and at the time, being an unlicensed aircraft maintenance engineer, I got to compete with the licensed and experienced engineers who have worked on bigger machines that I still dream today to work on. And I got so encouraged to work, to dream even harder. Not only that, but inspired so much that today I am proud to be a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer in this male-dominated field.
That's brilliant. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. That's what I love about WorldSkills. When you get to talk about young people and they tell you how great it's been, it just makes it so worthwhile. Thank you so much, Euphrasias. I'm now going to turn to Neil. You've just heard Euphrasias sharing her experience and also realizing that, well, it's lacking a bit in diversity in her skills. So you've done a much wider piece of research on that. So I'm going to hand over to you so you can share a bit what that piece of research was about, what your findings were, and what your conclusions were.
Sure. Thank you very much, Laurence, and thank you for the invitation from WorldSkills to talk about our work on diversity and inclusion in the United Kingdom. Our starting point for doing a bit of a deep dive analysis into diversity and inclusion was, first of all, we could see we had a problem, particularly around gender diversity and particularly around young people from Black and ethnic minorities. We could see that a lot of the young people we were working with were white. There was gender segregation in terms of young women working in particular training programs and competitions like health and hair and beauty, and young men tending to be in engineering and construction. And we were also concerned that we weren't really capturing a sense of young people we wanted to work with who may have been socially disadvantaged, or young people who were identifying as LGBT, so lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender. And so we thought there's an onus on us to make sure that the work, the training, the competitions activity, and the careers advice work that we do, there's an onus on us to make sure that as many young people as possible can benefit from this work and this training, because it would help them in their work and their careers, and will help them in life as well, and help the employers that they eventually go on to. So there was a huge, I think, first step, which was we have to do something because we're not being as inclusive as we should be. And I guess the second big driver was, we as WorldSkills UK are representing the United Kingdom within WorldSkills and on the world stage. And so we have a duty to represent the diversity of all young people in the United Kingdom. And we felt that we weren't doing that appropriately or fully. So what did we do? We decided to do a piece of diagnostic research. We worked with an organization called the Social Innovation Partnership for about a year. We undertook some literature review research, some data analysis. We interviewed and surveyed some 700 stakeholders over a year. We had an advisory panel of experts advising us on what we can or should be doing in terms of access to our programs. The big issues that came out of the research and big challenges were how we could actually reach and appeal to more young people from diverse communities, how we should be tackling stereotypes and preconceptions in the work that we're doing. There was a big concern about were we providing enough support to really help, whether it was young women or young people from Black and ethnic minorities, really help support them through the competition journey and reducing barriers to entry and competition. And then there were bigger issues as well around the role of WorldSkills UK as an organisation in talking to its partners and within the skills system across the UK about the importance of diversity and inclusion, and us leading the way on a conversation around diversity and inclusion and its importance to young people. We quickly turned the research into a 5-point plan so that we could get moving. We put in place 40 KPIs around diversity and inclusion and started quite a comprehensive data gathering exercise, because I believe that data really helps you pinpoint where your challenges are, and if you're not collecting the right data, you don't really understand where the problems are and therefore how you pinpoint and fix them. So 5 points that came out around some of that was, firstly, we've been working with our partners to make sure that we are more attractive and more inclusive in our registrations. And our most recent data from 2020 shows that we are making progress in attracting more young people who are identifying as LGBT, more young people who are Black and from ethnic minority communities, and more young people from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. But, well, there's always a but we are flatlining in terms of attracting young women into the competitions, and particularly young women into engineering and construction competitions. The second thing that the data does is allows us to pinpoint where we can take positive action. As a result of this data, we know there have been some long-standing challenges in underrepresentation in some of the skills and competitions work, and now what we're working on in particular is looking at gender segregation, how we can attract more young women into the competitions where they're underrepresented, and also, also in response to Black Lives Matter, looking at where young people from Black and ethnic minority communities may be disadvantaged in getting access to some of our programs and taking particular action on those particular areas. The third thing we were addressing was we needed to demonstrate more role modeling to boost confidence for young people in our competitions programs so they could see themselves and people like them in our competitions. And we started doing that last year, for example, through an awards program, Diversity and Inclusion Awards, which was about celebrating success among our partners. And I'm pleased that Sharon's here today on the panel. We've been working with Coca-Cola European Partners as our primary partner on that, which is all about celebrating and encouraging and motivating more of our partners to encourage more young people from diverse communities into the work that we do. Fourth area is looking at particular parts of the UK where there is more diversity and targeting those areas. So our data shows us, for example, that young Black people from ethnic minorities come from London and Manchester. So again, we want to target those particular areas and help colleges in those areas share their best practice with other colleges in other parts of the country, to make sure that they are really bringing through talent and supporting talent wherever it comes from to come into our program. And the fifth thing we did is look at our marketing, and we've set ourselves a target for the imagery we use in social media and across all of our marketing channels, so that at least 20% includes diverse, authentic imagery from skills competitions. One of the winners of a diversity award last year told me, she was a young Asian woman who said to me, "You can't be what you can't see." And so if you can't see yourselves through the imagery we're using for our skills competitions, you may conclude that we don't want you. The opposite is true. So we have to make sure that we are demonstrating and showing through our imagery that we want as many young people as possible to be involved. Well, we've also concluded that we can't just talk about this as an organised skills organisation in terms of the work we do with skills competitions. We also have to practice what we preach as an employer. We also have to be the change we want to see. So alongside the diagnostic research into the skills competitions, we also undertook a comprehensive review of our human resources practices and policies, looking at diversity and inclusion, and again, taking a data-led approach, looking at the diversity of our workforce, the diversity of our leadership team. And we found that we've got quite a broad and diverse workforce. 45% are women, 15% are LGBT, a quarter are non-white, a third have faith, 12% have a disability. But like many organizations, we are challenged from a leadership perspective, and the leadership of the organization is currently 4 white men. And that's the lack of diversity you can see. The diversity you can't see within that is LGBT diversity amongst those 4 white men, faith diversity, and social mobility diversity. It's of course not being defensive, but there's a lot more we need to do to improve our diversity. But I always make the point there's diversity you can see and diversity you can't see. So there's a lot for us to do, I think, still as an employer. Our recent staff survey around diversity showed that more than 90% of our team feel that we are an inclusive workplace. And while that's a fantastic score, there's always more to do. So in concluding, I would say we've done a lot, but there is a lot more to do. We are working on our training competitions programs and reaching out to more young people, working with our partners to do that, to develop resources to make sure we are as inclusive as possible. And as an employer, we will continue to make sure that we are an inclusive workplace. And as a result of Black Lives Matter and discussions with our team, looking at what are we doing to make sure our HR recruitment, retention, and promotion policies are all creating the right environment, that we are attracting the right talent into our organization. And the next big step for us is what we've been talking about, is how do we engage then all of our partners in a broader campaign across the UK skills sector, with WorldSkills in the UK taking more of a leadership vocal role in championing diversity and inclusion for all, and for the young people we all want to see progress in work and life. That's all from me, Laurence.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. It's very interesting, both in the findings for the research and also what you're trying to do to kind of make change happen. So having heard now what Neil's doing on his side in terms of skills competitions, I'd like to turn to 2 representatives from the industry, and I'll start with Megan from Mastercamp. So welcome. As I said, thanks for taking the time. So you've heard from what the piece of research Neil's done. You've also heard what he's implemented or trying to implement together with his team to bring about change. What are the strategies within your company to improve EDI, and why would you actually, as a company, want to get involved in that question and want to do something about it?
Well, I mean, first, I think it's our responsibility to get involved. You know, as a company, we have a lot of influence over what's happening in the world. And, you know, it's just genuinely our social responsibility to make sure that we're providing that and providing that safe space for everybody. It's been interesting. You know, we're a software company that provides software to the manufacturing industry. So we're kind of at this intersection of two very dominant male industries, and it's been interesting as a female leader of a company, you know, like that. So I certainly have a you know, personal interest in particularly in that gender diversity and making sure that we're attracting young women into both software engineering and into manufacturing. You know, I love that comment about you can't be what you can't see. And I think part of it is just that initial exposure. You know, if Euphrasias, I think you mentioned that your father, you know, played with tools and used tools. And so that was something that you know, noticed when you were younger and kind of helped get you into what you were in. But there are many girls out there, there are many Black people out there, you know, all sorts of diversity that just don't have that kind of exposure. And so, you know, this is kind of like a two-pronged approach. It's finding ways to reach out to your community, get, you know, people involved and give them a chance to see what the opportunities are at a very early age so that they can start considering that when they're thinking about what their careers are. But then on the other end of it, you have to make sure that those opportunities are there for them. So that's something that we've been discussing a lot. You know, I think about the kind of company that we are, and there's all these little opportunities, little moments, little pieces of exposure that kind of create the company that you are and create a feeling. I don't know if you've ever heard of the campaign, It Was Never a Dress, but that campaign is about changing the perspective of engineering, of STEM, and it essentially says that it was never a dress. It's not a dress on the women's bathroom sign. It's really a girl in a suit and a cape. And so I loved that campaign because, again, it's just getting you to reimagine, to think what that looks like. And so I had all of the bathrooms at the office painted with capes on them. And it's, you know, it's a small movement. It's a small thing to do, but it kind of builds, it creates a foundation, and it creates an identity of who you are and that inclusion, and gets people to know that we are very inclusive. You know, we're located in a very non-diverse area of the country, of the world. So one other thing that we've been able to do is really embrace the remote workforce. And that's allowing us to open up that diversity and make sure that you know, we're able to, you know, hire people from all backgrounds, all areas of the world. And that's something that we're very proud of. It has definitely been less of a focused, intentional, and
I think we've just lost Megan there. Ah, she's back.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you again. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It happens.
The dangers of virtual events.
Meetings, yes.
I was just mentioning that we've made this more of an intentional initiative, and we're talking at leadership about how we approach this in two ways. And so one of them is really opening up more opportunities for women, for you know, for people of color, for, you know, all sorts of backgrounds. But then we're also, you know, we've been using the term think globally and act locally. And so we have been supporting a lot of community initiatives. There's one called Girls for Technology, and its mission, it's a nonprofit organization with a mission to close the gender gap in technology. And because of the fact that it's located in an inner city, it you know, it focuses on young Black girls, and it's something that we're very proud of. It's you know, doing something locally that we're able to make a difference in exposing young women into different careers that they didn't even know existed. So, you know, I think it's just one of those things that it's our responsibility to do what we can. It can be overwhelming, you know, there's so much that needs to be done. And it can be difficult to really focus on something when you think about all that. So our approach has been to kind of take it step by step, you know, and really focus on what we can do to make a difference locally, and then, you know, hope that change permeates throughout the world.
Yeah, it's you have to start somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Sharon, I'm going to turn to you. A bit of the same question, actually, because when you know, it's Coca-Cola after all. When I look at the ads, when I look at, you know, and anything I've seen about Coca-Cola, it looks diverse from the outside. So can you share a bit with us about why on earth, you know, the impression we have might not be the right one, or if it is, what are you doing to kind of push that even further? So Sharon.
Thank you. I would absolutely love to sit here and say that the ad reflects the organisation, but I can't. I'm afraid I can't do that. But it's an interesting one. If I think back to, and I watched it recently, there was the Hilltop advert that the Coke company did many, many years ago, and that reflected diversity across the world. And as an organisation and the brands that we produce and that we sell, that's our aim, is to be in every community. So from a workforce perspective, we need to be representative, but it's actually interesting that it's still a journey as a business, global and as large as we are, that we're still on. Neil and I met probably in about 2018, early part of 2018, and we happened to be on the stage together. And there was something that just clicked that said, this is the journey we as an organisation are on, and WorldSkills are on that journey. It makes perfect sense for us to partner, because actually for us it's about bringing the young people through. They're our future generations, not only of product drinkers, but also in terms of driving our business forward. You know, we have to engage and embrace generations all of the time to keep our business strong and thriving. And for us as an organisation, you know, I'm focused very much on the UK, but this is a global approach. We talk very much about inclusion. We start with the I rather than the D. So when we started our journey, we talked about diversity, and it was very much focused on gender. And that really started the conversation at all levels throughout the business. That came with its challenges, because you can imagine when you talk about one gender and not the other, you know, we started what was known as a women's network, and the men said, why can't we have a men's network? I just didn't kind of get it. So the education wasn't really there. So we then flipped it to inclusion. So if you want people to really make a change and make a difference, they need to understand. For females like us, for people from different diverse backgrounds, it's logical. But when you come into a corporate environment, for some reason that logic goes out of the window. So we now need to bring it back in and re-educate. And so we've had a re-education programme for all employees over the last 5 years. That's been working really, really well. And as such, we stopped in 2018 our women's network, because we felt that that message, that journey had probably reached its natural conclusion. And if we were to be much more inclusive, we needed to have a network that embraced everybody. And so we started with our Just Be programme. So it was creating much more of an inclusive culture. And we really just had 3 things, which was be yourself, be valued, and belong. Those were the 3 things. And interestingly enough, when you often hear big corporations talk like that, you often hear it at very senior levels, and it doesn't resonate throughout the rest of the organisation. This is one that trips off everybody's tongue. Everybody across our 4,000 employees in Great Britain all know it, all understand it. They all understand Just Be. And we have a number of Just Be ambassadors who have made their decision to be aligned to a diverse characteristic. And there are 9 pillars that we have. So we haven't said, well, you know, you're going to be the one that sits in that particular pillar. People volunteered, and it created a movement. It created an absolute movement from grassroots all the way through to senior leadership. It is so much embraced now that the inclusive culture is there for us. And why we started with now and moved away to that inclusive culture is because if we are looking at diversity, whether that be gender, whether that be ethnicity or sexual orientation, you have to have the environment that people feel comfortable in. So if we only ever focused on the diversity and didn't put in place making that inclusive culture, people would leave, because you kind of, you know, have a target and go, we're going to get all of these people in, but we have no support networks, no support mechanisms in place. And that's more often than not why diversity fails, because you haven't set the foundations to really support it. And then what we've also done is we've taken our apprenticeship programs, which are very much geared to that young audience of 16 to 24. And we are using that group as well to bring in more diversity. So whether that be female engineers in our organisation, I champion that so much. I kind of bang the drum all the time, because it's really difficult to even get female engineers to come in. To get Black female engineers to come into our organisation, I mean, it's just alien. It is absolutely alien, because as a soft drinks organisation, when I speak to a lot of young people, they say, so what do you do? And I say, well, we make soft drinks, but they don't understand what goes into making a soft drink. It kind of just appears in the shops. So we're using our apprenticeship programme to try and drive much more diversity into our business, because as I said right at the beginning, that's the future for us. Whether they are young people who purchase our products or young people who will be the leaders of our products in the future, we have to build that succession, and we have to build it really, really early. So the WorldSkills agenda in the UK and our agenda in the UK are bound together.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm sure I can see Neil grinning, so I'm sure he's loving hearing that. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Sharon. That's really interesting. Another perspective as well, after Megan. So we've got Just Be and the capes on the bathroom doors. So that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to turn to Denise as well, because Denise, you're from more the educational side of things, I would say. So what are you doing on your side in terms of education? Because we've heard Euphrasias coming through the system. How are you tackling that at your level in education?
Thank you for the question, Laurence. But if I may, I want to congratulate Euphrasias. She has been so inspiring. It's great to see role models like her. I love to hear the story of Megan with the cape and Sharon's with diversity. That's also where we are at. And Neil, I think the fact that you did that survey and that research and that action plan is in fact paving the way to a lot of other countries. So in Canada, the first thing I'd like to say is that I represent colleges and institutes, cégeps, polytechnics across the country. And for us, part of our DNA as college and institute is really access. We're all about access, no matter who you are, because we are often the first door or the last door. And when I say the first door, I mean the first door, the first person maybe to attend post-secondary education, or the last door is because all other doors have closed. But because colleges have wraparound services, diversity of credentials, diversity of programs, there's always a place for a learner, no matter their age, no matter who they are. So in Canada, as you know, we're a big country, we're huge. And when I talk about access, just to give you an example, our campuses, where they are, because they are two of the panelists that talk about access, about visibility. Our campuses, in fact, we're able to say, because we geolocated all of them, 95% of Canadians live at 50 kilometers or less to a campus. And 86% of Indigenous live to close to less than 50 kilometers. So that means that there's an opportunity to pursue studies. So I'll talk about three initiatives that we did in Canada. One that was for the entire post-secondary education system. And it was not copied, but inspired, I would say, from a strategy that was used in UK that is called Athenos 1. And it was to ensure that there were more women in research. So, because there was an issue when we began to look at research, whether it was applied research or pure research, there seems to be a tendency to have more men, for example, and not as much diversity as what we wanted. But when we looked at Athenos 1, we felt it was only about gender. And Sharon talked about that. And we decided to move it also to look at the 3 dimensions. So equity, diversity, and inclusion. And now institutions, there's a charter that has been developed, a specific charter on those. And now institutions can be identified as being part of those institutions that recognize EDI. And it means that it's a way to show to potential researchers, come, there's room for you, there's a place for all of you. And the other thing that we have been doing, we do a lot of work overseas. We work, for example, in 25 countries this year, and we've been doing that for the last 48 years, which is how old we are as an association. And we have embraced also this inclusion and diversity. And we link it to the Sustainable Development Goals. So whether we talked about gender equality, quality education, decent work and economic growth, or reduce inequalities. And it was interesting because when I heard Neil talk about their research and what they found out and their action plan, I could almost write ditto, ditto, ditto. I can elaborate more if you want on the challenges and some of the lessons learned, but for us, there's a need to do something. You cannot just ignore and pretend it will happen on its own. There are definite actions that one needs to take. And just to paraphrase, not paraphrase, but repeat what was said earlier, which I just love, when Neil said, you cannot be what you cannot see from one of the participants. For me, it tells the whole story.
That actually brings me back to Neil, because you've elaborated a bit on the research, but having now heard what's being done in industry, having heard how education is looking at it, do you think there's anything more that's how could we as skills organizations work to improve EDI? Is there anything more from what you've heard and what you've looked at that we could do as skills organizations?
I think from what I've heard, it demonstrates that everybody's working on this agenda. And whether it's employers, industry, education sector, skills organizations, and there's demand from the next generation and young people to want to be included. So it feels like we are all pushing in the same direction. I think that therefore there is a role for WorldSkills, I think, as a convener of industry as a convener of education and governments around the world, then actually there is an opportunity and a platform for WorldSkills to occupy a space which is bringing people together to drive this agenda forward. We don't, as Denise was just saying, we don't have to reinvent wheels. We know we know what the issues are. We can all do research and do our own research into them, but actually the research will tell you the same things, that it's about role modeling, it's about being what you can see, it's about tackling barriers to access, it's about talking about the challenges openly and taking a leadership position on all of this and saying that whatever we're doing just isn't good enough. Because I think from a WorldSkills UK perspective, we're very conscious that we are in a society where there are, of course, problems around prejudice and discrimination. And we know that from an economic perspective and a talent perspective, we need to be harnessing more and more talent from all across the society to help young people succeed in work and life, and therefore to help the UK economy succeed. And that's the same everywhere. Nobody has a monopoly on wisdom on all of this. But I think by pooling resources, and WorldSkills is in a unique position, I think, in every country it operates in, and therefore at a European and global level, to really think about how it can convene its partners more effectively and stand up for change, and not just talk about it, but then think about what it can actually do through its partnerships by convening them, but also what WorldSkills can do in the competitions activity to be, I think, a leadership beacon and to demonstrate the art of the possible and to show, I mean, from Euphrasias' example of, her experience and what she has been able to do and what she's done, how do we celebrate that, promote that to encourage other young women and think about how we can look at gender diversity within WorldSkills, Black and ethnic minority diversity, LGBT diversity, disability and learning diversities, all sorts of issues per country which are prevalent in those labour markets. How can we bring all of that together to demonstrate that WorldSkills is really invested in the success of the next generation, whoever they are, whatever your background, wherever you're from?
Okay, thank you. So WorldSkills competition is a showcase, basically, and as providing the role models to kind of change things out there with the support of others.
Sorry, because the champ, I'm getting excited now, but the champions of the competitions are role models in terms of what they achieve and in terms of what they do and the standards and the success they go on to achieve. So if we can be more inclusive right at the beginning at each national level and bringing more diversity into the programs of competitions which then feed into the international level, then we will see, as part of a celebration at the finals globally, when you see the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony, a massive celebration of diversity, as well as a massive celebration of technical skills and a massive celebration of success. Then I think we know that WorldSkills is, part of a global agenda in driving change.
Okay, thank you. Well, before I take a couple of questions, Euphrasias, I'm going to turn to you, especially after what Niels just said. I mean, you've heard a bit what's going on. Would you, as a young person as well, from your experience and after hearing what we heard, would you encourage us in some of the things that have been said? Would you have any ideas for us as well as to what we could do to even better promote diversity in our competitions, in our working life, in our education? I'd be interested in hearing the opinion of a young person. You need to unmute, Euphrasias.
Sorry. Me here as a young person, I would only echo so much on what everyone has said. That is really such great work that is happening. But me being a youth and being on this platform, I believe somebody who's watching on Facebook or has zoomed in to watch this, the fact that they're able to see a young person and see my story or hear my story, they'll be inspired and encouraged by that. So for me, what I would really emphasize on is inclusion of the youths, like more engagement of the youths in such programs for them to be an encouragement and inspiration for the other people out there. And the other thing is inclusion in the decision-making platforms, because that is definitely diversity for me. Like, the young people have to also take part in the decision making. It is really important to have their voice and have their say. And I would probably leave the panel and maybe WorldSkills with a question to say, we talk about, we are doing so much in the gender diversity in other areas, but my question, having competed and what the competition did for me as I stand here today, what is WorldSkills doing or the industry doing about the disabled people or physically challenged people to take part in competitions? Because when we speak of role models, they also need to see their fellow kind, their fellow people doing it out there. So what is WorldSkills and the industry doing to see that these people can be included, as well as we all understand they will need special needs and special attention, but we cannot leave them behind? That would be my perspective.
I think that's a very good question, actually. And as we're moving over to questions, we've got a few. Euphrasias had a really good one. So whilst I have a look on one of the other ones, I think we've got time for 2-3 questions. Would anyone like to take up the challenge of what Euphrasias just brought up in terms of disability? Anyone? Sharon, I think I can see you getting ready.
I'm getting ready. And it was a really good point that Euphrasias raised, because as a business, we have been looking inwardly on ourselves and to say, how do we support people with disabilities coming into our organisation? And so we have become a disability confident employer. We're at the very early stages of that accreditation, but it really puts a spotlight on what do we need to do differently. And I'll give you a really good example. So with our sales roles, our employees have to drive a car, they have to go into outlets. And there was always this kind of barrier or this mindset that, well, somebody in a wheelchair couldn't do that. And we hired a young gentleman because on paper and when he was in his interview, he just blew us away. So almost the fact that he was in a wheelchair became secondary, and therefore we had a vehicle for him that was adapted for his needs, and he is high-flying just like somebody who is non-disabled. So it goes to show, as a business, if you really put the focus on it, you can make the difference. You just have to change the mindset, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, so changing a mindset is one. I can see Neil roaring to go as well.
Because that is a really good question, and it's the range of disability. I mean, Sharon's just been talking about. I mean, we are also, as WorldSkills UK, a disability confident employer. We've been through a process to make sure that we are disability inclusive. And we run skills competitions for young people in the UK who have learning disabilities. But I think your particular question, Euphrasias, was around physical disabilities and how can we be more inclusive of that? And I think that is a good challenge. I know there is another skills competition organisation in the world which particularly focuses on disability and physical disability. But I think the challenge is a good one for us, and thinking about how do we bring physical disability into our conversation around diversity and being more inclusive. Because if you come to our competitions and we are championing diversity, but excluding one particular aspect of the challenges that lots of young people will face, then we're not being fully inclusive. And so, but there may be a way of us working with the organisation that runs skills competitions for young people who have disabilities, to work more closely with them and partnering with them and demonstrating what we can do together, because it's back to that partnership working. I think that by partnering and convening partners, we can demonstrate that we are saying what we mean and walking the talk.
So maybe I'd like to add something, if I may, Lawrence. So for us, of course, in the post-secondary education sector, it is something very important. whether to be able to accommodate students that have either a hearing disorder or that have an eye impairment. And they are using a variety of ways, even accommodate students that had a brain injury. And I'll just give a very cool example of applied research done in a college to help students that have eye impairment, where they used 3D to create volcano. Thank you. Sorry, I think Vulcan was someone in a movie. So that used a volcano, and where students can feel the morphology, if you want, of different environments with their hands. And this applied research, in fact, is being used by a variety of partners now, because they realize that it can be used at elementary school, at high school, and not only at post-secondary education. So I thought I would mention this because for us it's extremely, extremely important. And again, I'll go with what this young fellow had said: you cannot see what you cannot be what you cannot see.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions who have come through, and I think two of them are pretty similar, and they both have to do actually about what kind of selection process do you run in order to ensure participation of disadvantaged groups or minorities, or to promote the participation of women in competition, which links also to the same typical question of saying, if you're being showcased as a role model, it means you need to participate first. So what actions do you actually take to support the presence of more minorities or women in competitions? So Neil, I think that's one for you, and I think that'll be the last one that we will be looking at.
Okay, so this is where I go into the work that we do with our competition organisation partners in the UK. The majority of young people coming into our competitions come from colleges. And so we've been working with college leaders and our partners to specify activities and give them resources and build confidence to encourage them to encourage more young women, for example, to come into the competitions. And this is the point about equity, is you shouldn't assume a level playing field. You should not assume that everybody is on a level playing field. You need to take positive action and reach out and do particular activities to attract, in particular, for example, young women, as that's the question, into engineering, construction, digital careers, and think about what more you need to do to help them, first of all, understand the competition process and to feel confident about getting involved and getting engaged. One of the interesting things that came out of our research was, and this is a massive challenge for us and the whole of WorldSkills, is the word competition. In a gender analysis and looking at so we did some work into this, looking at the words we use and how we describe what we do, and a lot of the words we use, we found that it was potentially off-putting for lots of young women. And so we do have to look at all of these things in the round and take more proactive measures to go and seek talent, not just expect talent to put its hand up and to put their hands up and say, yes, I want to get involved. You have to encourage and give people the confidence and the tools to go and seek out the talent. And I think that's the most important thing that we found through our research, was that often when we were talking to partners or judges and others, it was often, well, these people don't come forward. You know, the people who are coming forward are young men. So we'll go beyond the young men and go and find the young women who are equally talented and who want to take part, but who for many reasons may not be pushing themselves forward. And so it's not just about giving permission, but motivating and incentivizing your partners to go and find the right talent. And it's the same for any organization, whether you're a business or an education institution. You have to go out there and find the talent. Don't just expect the talent to turn up on your doorstep, or the right sort of talent. And so that's what we've been doing to make sure that we are incentivizing. And we're not perfect. Don't want to sit here and say we have this cracked. We don't. But we are making huge efforts to make sure that we're talking with our partners and trying to do everything we can to demonstrate that we want to encourage as many young people as possible to come forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that is kind of seems to be dead on time, I would say. Well, I think the time went really, really quickly because it is time for us to conclude. So I would just say that from lots of things I've heard, I think what is really clear to me is that if we're talking about skills competitions, then actually we need to turn to our stakeholders because they're the ones who are actually providing the young people. So we need to work with them, as Neil said, to kind of move this forward. So be it industry, be it education, be it the young people themselves. I think the importance of role models was also emphasized as well in everything we said. And then I think that the very interesting point was also the fact that you need to focus on education. Actually, you need to re-educate, and we need to re-educate ourselves. You know, it's a great example, you know, just changing an image on the front of a toilet door can do the trick. So maybe sometimes we overthink things and we need to think a bit just more down to the ground on more simple things actually around that. But yeah, go out of our way. We've got the opportunity as well through the crisis of hiring people who are not next door to us. So that's also opens up more doors to bringing people from disadvantaged backgrounds or disadvantaged areas in as well. So I think we've had plenty of examples to further this discussion. So for general information, we had a first meeting of a working group around the EDI question at our last competition in Kazan in 2019. And we are now looking at broadening that working group. We are looking at sharing more experiences. So I would encourage everyone who is interested to get in touch. You have the email address being shown at the moment, diversity@worldskills.org. If you are interested in joining that working group, please email us, let us know, and we'll get back in touch with you. Before I close this and thank everyone, I would also like to mention the next WorldSkills conference talk, which is actually coming up on a brilliant date for us. For general information, for those of you out there who do not know it, 15th of July is World Youth Skills Day, which is of special importance to us at WorldSkills because we're celebrating youth and skills. And on that day, we're actually hosting another conference talk. This time it's our champions, so only young people talking. And they'll be looking at youth skills and resilience and giving their view on those topics, which I think are very, very timely, because I think we've all heard that with the current crisis, with what is going on, young people are most likely to be affected. So do please join us for our next talk. Have a wonderful World Youth Skills Day next week. And thank you very, very much to our speakers today. Thank you for joining us, some very early, some later in the day. Thank you so much for your contribution. It's been great hosting you all. And a special thumbs up to Euphrasias, because this was a first for you. So very well done. Thank you very much, everyone. We wish you all the best for the coming weeks. And it's goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Take good care.